Hi everybody, this is Andrea Piper and this is my lesson that integrates all sorts of technology. It is called Geography Detective. So let's get to it. In this lesson, students will use inquiry-based learning to make inferences and observations about countries in Africa and how the geography of these places impact the way people live and trade. The technology used supports social studies skills and understandings, allows students to collaborate at high levels, and introduces them to Africa's geography. This lesson used to be riddled with level 1 learning, where students would simply identify locations and where they were located on a map. But this lesson takes the locating skill to the next level and allows students to draw conclusions about how geography impacts people in African countries. To start this lesson, we use Nearpod as a tool to access their prior knowledge. Students started with a vocabulary matching activity as an activator. In Nearpod, students joined with a code, and so they were able to match the terms on their own device. Then, as the teacher, you were able to keep track of their progress on your screen. After we started out with this matching activity, we started with our very first example. I gave students an example of what they would be looking at. It's a chart that contains all sorts of information from land area to climate, natural resources, how big the population is, what languages people speak, and what ethnic groups can be found in that country. So after I showed the first example, students shared their thoughts on a collaborate board. If they were able to make any sort of inferences, they wrote on the collaborate board what they had noticed. On the second example, I gave them another country and they had to look over the information to try to figure out what country it was. But before they did that, as a class, we highlighted different elements that would answer these questions. What challenges would people face here? Based on what you can infer, how do people travel and what makes travel difficult? What makes it easy? Based on what you see, do people in your country get along with each other? Why or why not? What do you think your country imports and exports? And where do you think most people live in your country? After I modeled the first two examples together, they participated in one more Nearpod activity where they were able to type in their answers to guess which countries were described in the two examples. The first one, of course, was Saudi Arabia, a country they learned about in a prior unit, and the second one was the US. After I finished modeling and we finished the activating activities, students went to my website and they chose a folder that contained information based on a number that they were assigned. So each student would pick a different folder and it would bring them up to their data set. Students received their data and took a few minutes to read through the data chart and make some observations and inferences. Then they met in a breakout group on Zoom with other students who had the same country they did. They compared notes and worked on the questions together, and they had to answer the questions that I just read. The last step of this lesson was for students to plot their country on a Google Tour Builder. They were required to cite at least 3 facts from the data chart and include 2 or 3 photos. I compiled all the student work into one, and they could use this resource to study for their math quiz. Google Tour Builder is such a cool tool. Students are able to plot the point of the country that they had, and then they were required to write a description. And remember, they had to cite facts from the data set. After all of the different countries had been plotted, I compiled them all into one, and students were able to use this on their math quiz. Google Earth was also a great tool for students to use when trying to narrow down what location they had been assigned. For example, in their chart, if they had seen the Nile River, they could always just go over to the search field and try to find the Nile River. That might give them an idea of where their country was located. After students plotted their locations on the Google Tour Builder, we went over each country as a class. This way, students would be able to prepare for their quiz, but they would also be able to contribute information that they had answered in the questions while they were collaborating with their peers in the Zoom breakout group. I love this activity. And students seem to really like it too. This lesson's full of opportunities for students to collaborate and think critically about how physical and human geography impact how people live and what their lives are like. This is a wonderful lesson to introduce students to the geography of Africa.